The Supreme Court is hearing cases about men, biological men, competing in women's sports. You and I need to seriously talk about this. I'm Marcus Peter. On Tuesday, the Supreme Court began hearings that some people might argue are procedural because they think this is an open and shut situation. Some people might even argue it's boring, but go beyond the docket here. Read the docket and go beyond it. Little versus Hecox and West Virginia versus B.P.J.
Is that in Scrimeti, the court also said, we don't think that transgender are what's called a protected class or suspect category who have higher constitutional rights, like women, who have higher constitutional rights, like race or religion. When they do, then the court subjects the government to higher scrutiny. But when they don't, when there's no suspect class, then all the government needs is what it's called rational basis, just that the government's regulation has some rationality behind it. And it's hard for me to believe the court would say we're not allowed to have different categories for men's sports and women's sports.
The titles by themselves don't seem to carry a lot of weight. But when you push past the legal language, the question that's being asked here is about men competing in an equal plane manner in women's sporting categories. So really what's being debated at the Supreme Court level are questions about bodies, human persons, truth, the moral imagination of our entire culture. And so the justices are being asked whether states may protect women's sports by recognizing that biological sex has a meaningful reality, or whether we should stop protecting women's sports in general because biological sex is simply a cultural construct. That's really what's being debated. That question alone tells us how far we've drifted as a culture. For most of human history now, we would never have required a court, let alone 9 Supreme Court justices to debate this. Lower courts struck down the Idaho and West Virginia laws under Title IX and equal protection reasoning. Now, in effect, what they did was they treated sex as a feeling rather than a biological given, which means the lower courts are looking at men and looking at women and saying, yeah, there really is nothing between you that's different. Oh yeah, there's a difference in bone density, there's a difference in muscle mass, but we're going to ignore all of that. Those are just feelings rather than biological facts in the given.
How you feeling right now?
I'm feeling excellent. That was sweet, huh? Did you like that? Yeah! And I want to tell everyone else, I'm coming in this tournament. Every woman in this tournament better look out. I'm freaking coming.
Well, you heard it here, everybody. Fallon Fox coming for you in the ladies' tournament, advancing to the next round. Let's give it up one more time for Fallon Fox!
So now the Supreme Court, this thing has been punted to them, and they're facing the task of deciding whether the law must recognize and therefore bow before the ideological self-definition, which is problematic. We've talked about this in the past, because that self-definition right now is contradicting and colliding with natural law and physical reality. And because of that, it's attacking fairness. The Trump administration has lined up with the states, but a small army of amici, friends of the court, have flooded the court. And that usually signals that something deeper, something moral, something ethical, something deeper at the legal manner is happening. Because this is more than a sports jersey conversation. For Christians, this case matters deeply. Because the Christian vision of the human person begins with the fact that man is a body and soul composite being. That's found in the first few pages of Genesis. And that means something. The scriptures open with sexual difference as gift, as vocation. Male and female are created in a deliberate order. And that's flowing from the wisdom of God, the Creator. John Paul II, in his Theology of the Body, which I greatly encourage everyone read through at least once, he said this: according to Genesis 2:25, the man and the woman did not feel shame, seeing and knowing each other. In all the peace and tranquility of the interior gaze, they communicate in the fullness of humanity, which shows itself in them as reciprocal complementarity, precisely because they are male and female. Now, what does that mean? God made Adam and Eve. They were naked and without shame, and they beheld the bodies of each other as they beheld the persons of each other as one intrinsic reality. And therefore, Adam's gaze upon Eve and Eve's gaze upon Adam saw the intrinsic value of the other. And they saw how the other complemented themselves. Reciprocal complementarity, that man needs all that woman is for the sake of building society, and woman needs all that man is for the sake of building society. Gabrielle Kubi, in the book The Global Sexual Revolution, names these moves with precision. She writes that identity has been reduced to purely subjective self-definition, while biology is dismissed, even though each individual cell of a man's or a woman's body is masculine or feminine. You can never change that. The law must reflect reality. When law accepts the premise that sex has no stable meaning, no biological meaning, well, the consequences are disastrous. Sports are a clear example. Physical differences shape competition, strength, speed, endurance, fairness. If you ignore those differences in the name of inclusion, well, what we do is we end up excluding women from their own categories, their records, their opportunities, things that they labored for decades, for generations. As well, Gabrielle Kubi also warns, this ideology advances by appealing to compassion, but it murders the truth. She warns us that claims about the inalienable difference between men and women are being dismissed. If you say that a man is a man and a woman is a woman, you're prejudicial. But these differences are in medicine, they're in biology, but they're also in lived experience. No society would reject this if they were to think logically. That's why the result has become legal fiction. It's forcing us to assent to it. And they're enforcing this through courts, through institutions, and women's sports, collateral damage. Our bodies are gifts entrusted to us. They're meant for truth, they're meant for self-giving. Defending women in sports becomes one concrete way to defend the integrity of the human person and the order that God Himself inscribed into creation. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.